Welcome to Eternal Love Diaries, where real stories change real lives. Every love carries a story. And here, each one is told from the heart. Today's story follows James, a 38-year-old single father working as a senior accountant at a prestigious firm in Chicago. After losing his wife to cancer 3 years ago, he's been raising his 10-year-old daughter Lily alone, struggling to balance his demanding career with being present for her. When his new boss, Victoria, suddenly asks him to pretend to be her husband at an important family dinner, he reluctantly agrees, but only if she'll return the favor by meeting his friends. What begins as a simple arrangement quickly becomes complicated as feelings develop and past wounds resurface. As their pretend relationship blurs into something real, both must decide if they're brave enough to risk their hearts again when neither was looking for love. What happens next will challenge everything they thought they knew about second chances, vulnerability, and finding connection in the most unexpected places. I need you to be my husband this weekend. Victoria's words hung in the air of her corner office, the Chicago skyline stretching behind her. James Carson nearly spilled his coffee across the quarterly reports they'd been reviewing. His boss of only 3 months stood before him, arms crossed, expression deadly serious. This wasn't the kind of request he'd expected when she'd called him in for an urgent meeting on Friday afternoon. As senior accountant, he'd prepared for budget discussions, not a marriage proposal, fake or otherwise. "Excuse me," he managed, setting his mug down carefully on her glass desk. Victoria Matthews sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. "My family reunion is this weekend. My grandmother is turning 90, and she's been pressuring me about settling down for years." She paced the office, her usual confident demeanor replaced by something James had never seen before, vulnerability. "I told them months ago I was bringing my husband, just to get them off my back. I didn't think they'd actually remember." The desperation in her eyes was so at odds with the commanding CEO he knew that James found himself considering the absurd request despite himself. He had responsibilities, boundaries, and a daughter waiting at home with the babysitter. "Ms. Matthews, Victoria, I don't think this is appropriate," James said, straightening his tie. "I'm your employee. There are professional boundaries." He thought of Lily, who'd already lost her mother. How would he explain this strange arrangement to her? Yet something in Victoria's expression made him hesitate. Behind her polished exterior, he recognized the same loneliness he'd been carrying since Sarah passed away 3 years ago. The weight of expectations, of facing family gatherings alone, of putting on a brave face, he knew it all too well. Victoria leaned against her desk, her professional facade cracking further. "I know it's inappropriate and completely unprofessional. I wouldn't ask if I weren't desperate." She looked away, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "My family thinks I'm incapable of maintaining relationships because I prioritize work. My grandmother might not have many birthdays left, and I just want to give her peace of mind." The vulnerability in her voice struck a chord with James. He'd seen Victoria navigate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, yet here she was, undone by family expectations, something he understood all too well. James found himself considering the impossible. His weekend plans had consisted of helping Lily with her science project and catching up on laundry, the glamorous life of a single dad. "I have a daughter," he said finally. "Lily is 10. I can't just disappear for a weekend." He watched Victoria's face fall, and against his better judgment added, "But I might be able to help for one evening, if my friend Angela can watch Lily." The word surprised him as much as they did Victoria, whose expression brightened immediately. Before he could reconsider, he added his condition, "But you'll have to meet my friends next weekend. They've been trying to set me up for months, and showing up with my boss might finally get them off my back." The dinner was at Victoria's parents' lakeside home in Lake Forest, a 40-minute drive from Chicago. James adjusted his tie in the passenger seat of Victoria's luxury sedan, listening as she rapidly briefed him on her family members. "My mother Caroline is a retired judge, my father Robert is a surgeon. They've been married 42 years and still act like newlyweds. It's nauseating. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. My older brother Michael is a cardiothoracic surgeon with 3 perfect children. My younger sister Olivia is an environmental lawyer who just got engaged to a congressman. James raised an eyebrow, beginning to understand Victoria's anxiety. And you're the disappointment because you're only a wildly successful CEO? Victoria laughed, the sound surprising both of them. Exactly. The family failure who only runs a company with 200 employees and hasn't found time for a family. She glanced at him quickly. Thank you for doing this. I know it's strange. James nodded, thinking of his own small circle, friends who had become family after Sarah died, who supported him and Lily through the darkest days. Sometimes the families we choose understand us better than the ones we're born into, he said quietly. Victoria didn't respond, but he noticed her grip on the steering wheel loosened slightly as they turned into a long, tree-lined driveway. The Matthews family home was impressive, a sprawling lakefront property with manicured gardens and a view that took James's breath away. As they walked to the door, Victoria suddenly stopped. Wait, she said, reaching for his hand. Her palm was cool against his, the contact sending an unexpected current up his arm. We should probably look like we've done this before. James nodded, intertwining his fingers with hers, trying to ignore how natural it felt. They had spent the drive creating their cover story, married 8 months ago in a small ceremony, met through mutual friends. Simple enough to remember, complicated enough to believe. What James hadn't prepared for was how his heart would race when Victoria leaned into him as the door opened. Victoria. And this must be the mysterious husband. Caroline Matthews embraced her daughter, then turned appraising eyes to James. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions, questions, and scrutiny. James found himself drawing on memories of his life with Sarah to answer questions about their relationship, each recollection a bittersweet pang. Victoria's grandmother Eleanor, the guest of honor, took his hand between her papery ones. You look at my granddaughter the way my Harold looked at me for 60 years, she said, her eyes sharp despite her age. Don't waste time like Victoria has been doing. Life is shorter than you think. James swallowed hard, unable to form a response as Victoria gently led him away. Dinner was served in a formal dining room overlooking the lake. James found himself seated beside Victoria, across from her brother Michael and his wife. So, James, Victoria tells us you're an accountant at her company, Michael said, his tone suggesting he found this amusing. Isn't that a bit unconventional? Dating an employee? Victoria tensed beside him, and James felt a surge of protectiveness. Actually, we met before I joined the company, he lied smoothly. I took the job because I believe in Victoria's vision. Watching her work is inspiring, she has this remarkable ability to see possibilities others miss. He wasn't acting anymore, he meant every word. In the 3 months he'd worked for her, he'd witnessed Victoria's brilliant mind and unwavering determination. Victoria's hand found his under the table, squeezing gently in thanks. The conversation shifted, but James remained aware of her presence beside him, the subtle scent of her perfume, the way she laughed genuinely at his jokes, the brush of her shoulder against his. By dessert, he found himself forgetting they were pretending. When her father asked about their honeymoon, James shared the story of his actual honeymoon with Sarah in Maui, changing only the names. Victoria watched him speak, something soft in her expression that made his words falter. James is teaching me to slow down and appreciate moments, she said, rescuing him. Before him, I was all about the next goal, the next achievement. After dinner, Victoria's grandmother requested family photos on the terrace. You too, James. Your family now, she insisted. Standing with his arm around Victoria's waist, James felt a confusing mix of emotions. This wasn't his family. The woman beside him wasn't his wife. Yet something about the moment felt right in a way nothing had since Sarah died. When Victoria turned to look up at him, the setting sun casting a golden glow across her face, James forgot they had an audience. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. "You're doing great," she whispered, misinterpreting his gesture as part of their act. James nodded, unable to explain that nothing about what he was feeling in that moment was pretend. The drive back to Chicago was quieter than the journey out. "Your family is nice," James said finally, breaking the silence. Victoria snorted. "They were on their best behavior because of you. You should see them when they really get going." She glanced at him. "You were amazing, though. That story about our first date? I almost believed we really did get caught in that thunderstorm." James looked out the window, watching the city lights approach. "That actually happened with Sarah and me," he admitted quietly. "Our first real date. We ended up soaked, laughing in that little Italian restaurant on Clark Street." He hadn't spoken Sarah's name aloud to anyone but Lily in months. Somehow, it felt right sharing her with Victoria. Victoria was silent for a long moment. "Tell me about her," she said finally, her voice gentle. And to James's surprise, he did. He told Victoria about Sarah's laugh, her passion for teaching, how she'd fought cancer with the same determination she'd brought to everything in life. How empty the house had felt after she was gone, how he'd learned to be both mother and father to Lily. "She made me promise not to disappear into grief," he said as they pulled up outside his apartment building. "Some days I keep that promise better than others." Victoria reached across the console, her hand covering his. "She'd be proud of you, James. Anyone would be." The following Saturday arrived too quickly. James stood in his living room, watching Lily arrange her rock collection while they waited for Victoria. "Is she your girlfriend, Dad?" Lily asked, her expression serious. James knelt beside her, choosing his words carefully. "No, honey. Ms. Matthews is my boss. We're helping each other out as friends." Lily considered this, her eyes, so like Sarah's, studying him carefully. "Mom would want you to have friends," she decided finally. "She told me to take care of you, you know. Before she went to heaven." James pulled his daughter into a hug, his throat tight. "We take care of each other, Lil," he whispered into her hair. The doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. Victoria stood in his doorway looking nothing like the polished CEO he knew from the office. In jeans and a simple blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders, she seemed younger, softer. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy. "I brought cookies. I wasn't sure if that was appropriate for meeting your daughter." James smiled, stepping back to let her in. "Cookies are always appropriate. Victoria, this is Lily." His daughter approached cautiously, then brightened when Victoria knelt to her level. "Your dad tells me you're building a solar system model. I used to love astronomy when I was your age." The ice broken, Lily eagerly led Victoria to see her half-completed project, leaving James watching from the doorway, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. Angela arrived to watch Lily, giving James a significant look when he introduced Victoria. His friends had reserved a table at their favorite restaurant, a casual place with the best burgers in Chicago. Walking in with Victoria beside him, James felt a strange reversal of their previous roles. Now he was the one introducing her to his chosen family, Mark and Diane, who had been there the night Sarah died, Carlos and Jenny, who had taken Lily for weekends when James needed to breathe, Angela, who understood his grief because she'd lost her husband the same year. "So you're the boss who's been working our James to the bone," Mark said, his tone teasing but his eyes assessing. Victoria handled the interrogation with grace, winning over his skeptical friends with her genuine interest in their lives and her obvious respect for James. "He's the best senior accountant I've ever worked with," she told them. The company would fall apart without him. Under the table, James's hand found hers, a mirror of her gesture the week before. This time, though, there was no audience to perform for, just the two of them, connected in a moment of understanding. When Carlos asked how they'd gone from boss and employee to something more, Victoria looked at James, letting him take the lead. "Sometimes the right person comes along when you least expect it," he said simply, surprised by how true the words felt. Later, walking Victoria to her car, James felt a tension between them that hadn't been there before. "Your friends are wonderful," she said, stopping beside her vehicle. "I see why you've been hiding them from potential dates. They're very protective of you." James laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "They worry. After Sarah, I kind of shut down for a while." Victoria nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Grief changes us. After my divorce, I threw myself into work. It was easier than admitting I'd failed at something." The confession surprised him. Victoria had never mentioned being married before. The vulnerability in her admission created a new connection between them, a recognition of shared pain. "So what happens now?" James asked, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "Our deal is complete. You survived your family, I survived my friends." Victoria looked up at him, the streetlight illuminating her face. "I was thinking," she said slowly, "maybe we could try this for real. Not the fake relationship part. The getting to know each other part." She hesitated, uncertainty replacing her usual confidence. "Unless that would be too complicated, with work and everything." James thought of Lily, of his responsibilities, of all the reasons this was a bad idea. Then he thought of how Victoria had sat on his living room floor helping his daughter arrange planets in order, of how naturally she'd fit with his friends, of how for the first time in 3 years, he was thinking about possibilities instead of just getting through each day. "I think," James said carefully, "that life is already complicated. But some complications are worth it." He reached for her hand, the gesture no longer part of an act. "Lily has a school play next Friday. Would you like to come?" Victoria's smile was answer enough, bright and genuine in a way he'd never seen at the office. As she drove away, James stood on the sidewalk longer than necessary, feeling something he hadn't expected to feel again, hope, fragile but persistent, like the first green shoot after a long winter. Some stories begin when you think yours is already written. Some loves find you when you've stopped looking. And sometimes, the most unexpected connections become the ones that heal us, one pretend date at a time. We'd love to know, which country are you watching from? Drop a comment below. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you believe in second chances, show your support by hitting the like button. Subscribe to Eternal Love Diaries for more stories that touch the heart and change perspectives. Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come disguised as simple arrangements, and the bravest act isn't pretending to be someone else, it's being brave enough to be yourself with someone new. Love doesn't always announce itself, sometimes it slips in quietly through the cracks in our carefully constructed walls, reminding us that our hearts are more resilient than we know. From Chicago, Illinois, United States, this is Eternal Love Diaries, where every story matters because every love deserves to be told.